Hello. First of all, if you can see past this whiteness, which I apologise for, I'll talk about the suspects. First, we have Lee Harvey Oswald. And the real question is he guilty? I think after the other videos, if you watch all my others, this is number 5, then perhaps you'll agree with me if you didn't or think so before, that he's not actually the one responsible for assassinating President Kennedy. Even though the government have been trying to sell that story since it happened, you know, he's the one, there's no question, he did it. I'm not convinced. And lots of people out there are not convinced at this point. So even though they've been trying to say that he's guilty, I think the real answer is no, he's not. What he said at the time is right. He was a patsy. He was the cover story. He was just convenient for the powers that be. He was in the right place at the right time, and they were like, yes, he's the one. So, no, we can cross him off the suspect list. Number 2, the US government. Perhaps that's quite shocking suspect to have on the list for some, and for others, they think the US government did it. So, did they do it? Are they responsible for killing President Kennedy? Well, it's possible, but I don't think they really did it. I think the answer is no. But it is plausible that they orchestrated a cover-up and obviously set up the decoy suspect, Lee Harvey Oswald. I was about to say his name backwards. And so, yes, the government are, you know, they're capable of orchestrating the cover-up and framing Lee Harvey Oswald. But if they didn't actually kill Kennedy and they did frame someone else, you know, and that's the story they've been trying to sell all these years, the big question is why? What would motivate them to do something like that? Well, I'll get to that later. So, moving on. Suspect number 3, Cuban assassins. Possibly one, possibly several. I think, given the political situation at that time, they are a plausible suspect. So, again, it's possible that they could be responsible. I think more possible than the idea that Lee Harvey Oswald did it on his own. But again, I think the answer, did they do it, is no. Because, as I said, given the political situation at that time, if they had been responsible for this, there would have been no reason for the American government to hide the fact that they were responsible. As far as I can see, they would just have, you know, the fish is a fish, call it a fish, you know, there would have no need for them to say that it was a lemon, if you know what I mean. So yeah, again, no. So, suspect number 4, the Mafia. Did they kill President Kennedy? Now, I think this is very likely, because they had the motives at that time, and they certainly had the means and the skills. You know, the Mafia used to be this huge, big, powerful organisation, and they were feared, like, all over. And that was at this time. So I think it is very likely the Mafia did it. Why would the government cover this up if this was true? And frame, and, you know, then say Lee Harvey Oswald did it if the Mafia really did it? I think maybe they would. I wanted to have 5 suspects, but I couldn't come up with a 5th plausible suspect, so so I've only got 4, so that doesn't matter, but I thought I'd mention it. So, the conclusion. Well, even though perhaps the Mafia are not obvious suspects, I think they are the real culprits behind President Kennedy's assassination, because Kennedy was cracking down on their power at this time, and he was a serious threat to their livelihood, to their well-being, because his brother Bobby, who was the Attorney General at this time, he was arresting Mafia dons and other powerful figures and just generally restricting their criminal activities and restraining them. And John was compliant in this. He was publicly supportive of the Mafia's downfall. So I think the Mafia had very real motives to kill Kennedy. Well, both Kennedys. And I say it like that. So yes, they had good reason, they had motive. And Bobby was gunned down. Well, was he gunned down? See, and I'll say that. I've died myself in knots. I think, no, well, anyway, he might have been stabbed. No, he was shot, wasn't he? Sorry, I'm going off on tangent. Bobby was killed within months of John's death. That was my point. And is that a coincidence? No, of course it's not. And now that I've gone down this path, I think if you say the Mafia are responsible for killing President Kennedy for the reasons I've just stated, I think you also have to say, assume, conclude's the best way. Assume, don't assume anything. Conclude that they also killed Bobby. I know there was this guy, I can't remember his name, and he has not in my notes, so I do apologise, but you know what I'm talking about, I hope. The guy that, went up to Bobby and killed him, but I don't know much about him. Maybe nobody looked into him. He could have Mafia ties, or he could have been paid off. You know what I'm saying? Anything's possible. So yeah, as I said, at this time, at the time President Kennedy was shot, the Mafia was still the powerful, dominant stuff of legends. So it's no question that they had the means to pull off something like this. I mean, it's very, very ballsy, even for somebody like the Mafia to to kill somebody as important and as, as the President of the United States. That's a huge thing. So it was very ballsy for even them to pull it off, but to have the idea and orchestrate it. But I think they certainly, at this time, they certainly had they still had the power. They could have pulled it off. And I think it's likely they did. And certainly the contacts. If nothing else, people that were afraid of them enough that they, they would get paid off to do this. It was certainly not a one-man job. I think perhaps we've come to that conclusion a long way back, despite what the US government were trying to say. So, back to the government. Why, if the Mafia were really responsible for killing President Kennedy, why would the government conceal this fact and frame somebody else and, make that the official story? This guy killed President Kennedy, he did it alone, that's the end of story. Why would they do that? Well, I think perhaps shock and embarrassment and, other reasons along those lines, because, as I said, a criminal family organisation is, as huge as the Mafia. If they could, or perhaps any criminal organisation, if they could successfully take out a sitting president, what are the consequences? What consequences would that have, for the future and the rest of the world and the other criminal organisations, people, I think they were just scared what that said about them and their failures. So they were like, the truth has to be concealed at all costs. Nobody must ever know. And that is why we've had this, you know, this thing for these last decades. And, you know, they've been trying to say, leave Harvey Oswald did it. He did it alone, and other people, you know, who are in the know enough or have investigated deep enough into this have been saying, no, that's not possible. This is not a one-man job. And there's no way Harvey Oswald did it. So, you know, you have both sides, and I think it's always going to be one of those things, because at this point, Kennedy's murder was too far in the past that the real truth is never going to actually come out. People are going to keep coming to their own conclusions. So this is my conclusion. The Mafia did it, and the government concealed it because they were afraid. I think that's really the basics of it. So thank you for watching, and if you have any comments to make, please please write in the comment section below, and like this video if you liked it, and I'll see you again.